What if a bright, kind-hearted young man with a promising future vanished into the night, leaving behind nothing but a few cryptic clues and an endless trail of unanswered questions? That haunting question continues to torment the family, friends, and community of Brandon Victor Swanson, a 19-year-old college student whose mysterious disappearance on May 14, 2008, became one of the most baffling missing person cases in American history. Brandon was born on the 30th of January, 1989, in the peaceful town of Marshall, Minnesota, where he grew up as the only child of Brian and Annette Swanson. His parents, both deeply involved in their community, provided Brandon with a nurturing and supportive upbringing. Their household was filled with love, stability, and a strong emphasis on education and values. From an early age, Brandon was encouraged to explore his interests and was known to be inquisitive, bright, and unusually mature for his age. He was the kind of child who always asked questions, not out of defiance, but from a genuine desire to understand how the world worked. By the time he reached high school, Brandon had become known for his friendly and easygoing nature. He had a wide circle of friends, many of whom described him as someone you could always count on, a good listener, a calming presence, and a loyal friend. He was also highly motivated academically. His curiosity and love for science, particularly in how things functioned, naturally led him toward the emerging field of renewable energy. Brandon was especially drawn to wind power, a topic that fascinated him not only for its technological complexity but also for its potential to help combat climate change and promote a cleaner future. After graduating high school, Brandon enrolled at Minnesota West Community and Technical College, where he pursued a degree in wind turbine technology. He had just completed his first year and was proud of his progress. He often spoke about his classes with enthusiasm and had begun mapping out a future career in sustainable energy, one that combined his academic passions with a sense of purpose. Brandon was excited about the opportunities ahead of him. He had big dreams, and he worked hard to make them a reality. Outside of school, Brandon remained close to his family. He had a particularly strong bond with his parents, often confiding in them and keeping them updated on his life, both academically and socially. He wasn't the type to pull away or keep secrets. His parents described him as responsible, dependable, and always communicative. He was also known for being careful and level-headed, never reckless or prone to risky behavior. All of this made his sudden disappearance that much more perplexing. On the night he went missing, Brandon had been celebrating the end of the college semester with friends in the small town of Canby, Minnesota. At some point during the drive home, he became disoriented and drove his car into a ditch. Believing he was near the town of Lynd, just a few miles from his home, he called his parents for help. What followed was a 47-minute phone call during which Brandon calmly described his surroundings, insisting he would walk toward a visible town light while they tried to find him by car. As Brandon Swanson walked alone in the darkness, he remained on the phone with his father, trying to explain his surroundings in hopes they could find him. He described gravel roads crunching beneath his feet, the occasional fence line running parallel to the road, and vast open fields that stretched endlessly under the night sky. There were no streetlights, no houses in sight, just the quiet, eerie emptiness of rural Minnesota. Then, suddenly, Brandon's voice changed. With urgency in his tone, he exclaimed, "Oh shit!" And just like that, the line went dead. It was abrupt, without any further sound. No struggle, no follow-up noise, just silence. That was the last anyone ever heard from Brandon Swanson. Panicked, his parents tried calling him back repeatedly. The calls would ring, but there was no answer. Fearing the worst, they drove around all night searching in the direction Brandon said he was headed, calling his name into the darkness, hoping to spot his car or find some sign of where he might have gone. But they found nothing. By morning, when Brandon still hadn't returned or made contact, they called the police and reported him missing. At first, law enforcement didn't treat the case with urgency. They assumed that Brandon, who had been drinking earlier that night, had likely wandered off to a friend's house or decided to sleep somewhere until he sobered up. Maybe he was embarrassed or simply needed time. But his parents knew better. Something felt deeply wrong. Eventually, the police began their search. They quickly located Brandon's vehicle, a Chevy Lumina, but it wasn't anywhere near the town of Lynd, where Brandon had believed he was. In fact, it was nearly 25 miles away, in a remote area near the small town of Taunton, northwest of Marshall. The car was found in a ditch along a gravel road, undamaged and with no obvious signs of foul play. There was no damage to the vehicle, no signs of foul play, and nothing inside or around the car that would indicate a struggle. It looked as though the car had simply veered off the road and become immobile in the soft ground. But what truly baffled investigators was the location. It was nowhere near the town of Lynd, where Brandon had told his parents he believed he was. This raised a troubling question. Had Brandon been disoriented, or was something more sinister at play? The discovery of the car only deepened the mystery, and as time passed with no sign of Brandon, theories began to emerge, each offering a possible explanation, but none with definitive answers. One of the most widely accepted and frequently discussed theories is that Brandon may have accidentally drowned. When his phone last pinged, it was in a location not far from the Yellow Medicine River, a shallow but treacherous waterway surrounded by uneven terrain, thick vegetation, and steep embankments. It's believed Brandon may have tried to cross the river in the dark and fallen in. Given the conditions that night, a pitch-black rural environment with little to no visibility, this theory holds some weight. Brandon might have misjudged the terrain, slipped, or gotten caught in the current. However, despite extensive search efforts, including the use of search dogs, dive teams, and thermal imaging, no body, clothing, or personal belongings have ever been found. That absence casts significant doubt on the drowning theory. In most drowning cases, some evidence eventually surfaces. But in Brandon's case, there has been nothing. Another credible theory is that Brandon may have succumbed to hypothermia. The night he disappeared, temperatures hovered around 39 degrees Fahrenheit, 4 degrees Celsius, chilly enough to pose a serious threat, especially to someone who was potentially intoxicated, lightly dressed, and walking through wet grass and marshy terrain for hours. Hypothermia can set in quickly under such conditions, especially if someone is wet or physically exhausted. In cases of hypothermia, victims often become disoriented and confuse a phenomenon known as paradoxical undressing, where individuals remove their clothing despite the cold due to the body's confused signals. Some have speculated that Brandon, lost and shivering, may have collapsed somewhere in a field or wooded area and simply never been found, his body hidden by tall grass, brush, or water. Despite multiple searches over the years, some using cadaver dogs and highly trained teams, no physical trace of Brandon has ever been recovered. That persistent lack of evidence continues to frustrate investigators and haunt his family. If Brandon Swanson became disoriented or injured in the dark, rural terrain, it's very possible that he was unable to seek shelter or assistance. The area he vanished in is made up of vast open fields, dense patches of vegetation, and deep ditches, making it difficult to navigate even in daylight, let alone at night with minimal visibility. If he had fallen, sprained an ankle, or become otherwise incapacitated, he may have simply collapsed in an isolated area that search teams either didn't reach or overlooked. This scenario could help explain why, after all these years, his body has never been recovered. It's entirely plausible that he wandered far outside the initial search radius and succumbed to exposure, alone in the dark. Though there's no physical evidence pointing to foul play, some theorists continue to entertain the possibility that Brandon may have crossed paths with someone harboring malicious intent. Perhaps he flagged down a passing car, hoping for help, and unknowingly stepped into a dangerous situation. Maybe someone else was out on those rural roads that night, someone who didn't have good intentions. However, this theory remains one of the least supported due to the lack of any struggle, signs of violence, or witnesses. The car was intact, and there were no signs that Brandon was forcibly taken or harmed at the scene. One of the strangest and most confounding aspects of the case is Brandon's mistaken belief that he was near Lynd when, in reality, he was almost 25 miles away near Taunton. This misperception has led to theories that he was disoriented, possibly due to alcohol or sheer darkness. Some experts have suggested that the flatness of the prairie landscape at night can play tricks on perception. Lights from distant farmhouses or towns might appear closer or farther than they really are, and without landmarks, it's easy to get turned around. Brandon may have sincerely believed he was near Lynd because of what he thought he saw, the significance of the "oh shit" moment. Perhaps the most haunting piece of this entire case is the final moment of Brandon's phone call with his father. After calmly describing his surroundings and expressing his frustration, Brandon suddenly exclaimed, "Oh shit," and the line went dead. That moment has become a chilling focal point for theorists and investigators alike. Did he trip over something? Did he fall into the river or a hidden ravine? Did an animal cross his path and startle him? Or did something, or someone, suddenly emerge from the darkness? What makes this moment so tragic is the helplessness that followed. His father kept the line open, calling his son's name into the phone, but there was no reply, just silence. Brandon's disappearance didn't just leave a hole in his family, it led to real legislative change. Frustrated by the initial response from law enforcement, who treated the incident as a routine case of a young adult likely sleeping it off or blowing off steam, Brandon's parents became vocal advocates for change. They pushed for a more urgent response protocol in missing person cases, especially when the individual is legally an adult but may be in danger. Their tireless efforts led to the passage of Brandon's Law in 2009. This legislation requires law enforcement agencies in Minnesota to take immediate action when an adult is reported missing under suspicious or unusual circumstances, regardless of age or perceived intent. It also ensures that communication between agencies is improved, especially in rural areas where jurisdictional lines can delay responses. Despite their activism and the attention brought to the case, Brandon's parents have never received the one thing they've longed for most: closure. They continue to hope for answers, to advocate for awareness, and to maintain a website dedicated to Brandon's memory and the search for justice. Brandon Swanson's case remains unsolved for a combination of painful and frustrating reasons. The area surrounding Taunton is notoriously difficult to search. The terrain includes thick grasses, marshy fields, water-filled ditches, and wooded patches. In some parts, tall grass can easily conceal a person lying just feet away. The search efforts, though extensive, may simply have missed the location where Brandon collapsed or fell. Aside from the location of his abandoned car and cell phone records showing the last ping, no physical evidence has ever surfaced. No wallet, no shoes, no scraps of clothing, not even a dropped phone. The absence of any trace has left investigators with nothing to follow up on. Brandon Swanson's disappearance remains one of the most haunting, unsolved cases. Despite speaking to his father until the moment he vanished, no trace has ever been found. His story continues to resurface in documentaries and online forums, a chilling reminder of how someone can vanish without a trace, and how painful it is to never know why.